Hey, it's Kevin DeWitch here and welcome back to the Recording in a Home Music Studio course. In this video, we're going to talk about recording orchestral parts. So, recording orchestral parts. Okay, again, we're going to see a pattern here. We're getting very repetitive. If you watch the recording percussion in the previous video, you're going to see a similar setup here. We have, again, in my opinion, in our home music studio, three options. We have recording real orchestral instruments. If you're a violin player, cello player, whatever you are, and when I say orchestral, I'm also including any brass, any wind, anything like that that does not fit into your normal rock instrument style. There can be any of those, okay? Alternatively, we also have virtual instruments becoming very popular these days. Very, very good quality brass, orchestral, violin, strings, all of those components can be found in virtual instruments. And then lastly, same as percussion, we have samples. All right, so recording real orchestral instruments, as I explained, similarly to the percussion, there is so many different instruments that can be recorded for an orchestra, including an entire orchestra, if you want to go down that path. I'm imagining you're probably not fitting an entire orchestra into your home music studio, but then again, I haven't seen your home music studio, so maybe it's bigger than most of ours. But assuming that we're talking about one or two orchestral instruments, if you are that way inclined and you play violin or you play cello or whatever else, we're looking at techniques very similar to recording any other acoustic instrument, all right? Any other like acoustic guitar or anything like that. Now you can get specialized microphones and setups exactly for your instrument, and please feel free to look into them. I don't play any of those instruments, so I can't claim to know exactly those sort of concepts and things like that. But if you don't have specialized microphones for that, then we can use, as I said, the same techniques as like an acoustic guitar. If you're sitting there playing a cello, we can place a condenser microphone in front of that cello, not that far away, you know, try different placements around the cello, etc., and you can get that recording into your computer. Now, if you're playing violin, you know, you might have to obviously put your microphone up quite high in a position that's going to suit where you place your violin on your shoulder, etc., and that sort of stuff. And again, the type of microphone is up to you to try. Most standard, I would say, would probably go with a condenser, but you might find a dynamic microphone sounds better, or a ribbon microphone sounds better. Or as I said, there may be a specialized microphone that actually fits onto your unit and gives you the sound you want, the real sound. So as I said, with all the other acoustic instruments, we're basically going to set the mic up in the position, get it sounding good. Again, make sure your instrument is in tune and sounds good as it is, whether that means restringing it, whatever you've got to do, fixing up your bow if you've got a bow, however it is that your instrument needs to sound great and be tuned, please make sure that's done, and obviously tune regularly if it is something that can be tuned regularly. You want to plug the microphone into your audio interface in the standard way that we do it. If it requires phantom power, turn the phantom power on, make sure you're getting sound, set your gain control to the appropriate level, again for the loudest part, and set up your tracks in your recording software and start recording. Now, I don't have any real orchestral instruments here, so I will not be able to be showing you an example of that, but as I said, it is pretty much identical to the process that we did with recording real percussion or acoustic guitars, that sort of stuff. So if you follow that process and just tweak it to your actual instrument, then you should be good to go. So the other option you have available, as I said, is virtual instruments. Again, as I indicated, there is lots of virtual instruments out there that you can buy from third parties. You may have some already included in your recording software, and some of them are absolutely fantastic. There is producers using virtual instruments for orchestral work on movies, everything, you know. Sometimes, yes, they go and get them retracked with real orchestras, but they've got a budget to do that, right? We don't have that budget. So we will create some orchestral parts with virtual instruments. And I'm going to do that in my song. And I'm going to be using a MIDI controller, as I always do. That can be plugged in with either a MIDI cable or, in my case, a USB cable that is doing a MIDI cable function. And depending on the style of MIDI controller you have will depend on how much you can get out of that virtual instrument. In my case here, I'm going to be using my Rolly Seaboard, and that gives me the ability, because it has lots of different functions on it, more than a standard keyboard, gives me the ability to do vibrato and slides and all that sort of stuff. Which can work really well with violins, cellos, all those sort of stringed instruments. So the process for this is the same as every other virtual instrument. We are going to create a track in our song, an instrument track or a MIDI track. We are going to load up a virtual instrument of our choice, find the right sound, set the input up so that we are controlling it with our MIDI controller, or if you plan on drawing your notes by hand, start drawing your notes by hand. If you're using the controller, obviously we're going to set it up, get our gain control right, click record and start playing away. Now, as I said, similarly in the piano or keys section where we're talking about virtual keys, in this regard here, we have the ability to take the exact same melody. So we record our melody once, and let's say our first part we've done is with a violin. Now we want to add a cello on top of that violin. We can either play it again if we want to have a slight variance, or if we want it to be identical, we just copy that to another track and change the virtual instrument to a cello. We want another orchestral instrument playing the same melody with that. So we start to build an orchestra. We can again do that by copying that part, or again, recording it again if you want it to be slightly variant. So I'll show you that process in my song, because I will do a take, we'll change the part, copy the part, put a different sound on there, join them together. I'll give you that impact there, but I'll also do maybe a second take so you can hear the slight variance in the playing and how that might sound better or it might sound worse depending on how variant I play it. Now the last one is samples, okay? So you can get plenty of samples again online, same as percussion. You can get them online that have orchestral parts in them. The big difference usually with orchestral parts, unless we are talking about percussion elements in an orchestra, like a timpani or something like that, but then you could consider that percussion. They're usually note-based, same as a guitar, same as a bass, all that sort of stuff. So unless you can find samples that match the exact notes and the same melody as your song, it's harder to sort of fit them in. If they're something that is just written in the key of your song and they're like stabs or something atmospheric, then samples may work for you. You can get one-shot samples, and you can find one-shots that might be of every note in the scale, and you can then create your melody from it, but it's not as natural as just playing it in. So where there might be a case that you can find some perfect samples, more than likely I would be using a virtual instrument in this case, because as I said, they're note-based, so it makes sense to be able to play the notes. But there are cases for samples, and we will see in my song whether we can find anything that suits and we can fit in. And if we do, I'll show you the process. But I'll show you the process either way. It's just we may not find a part that suits, or I may eliminate it after I show how it's done. All right, so let's go over to my song now and let's get these parts created. All right, so here we are back in Cubase, and we're going to set up our track for our orchestral part. Now, in my case here, we are going to use a virtual instrument because I don't have a real orchestra instrument, and even if I did, I couldn't play it. So we're going to mimic something with a virtual instrument here. So just like any other virtual instrument that we have done for any other part of this song so far, we're just going to add a instrument track. And again, in my case, I'm going to pick Equator 64. And we're going to select Orchestra Bus this time. We're going to add a track. It's going to load up our virtual instrument here, which we'll just close for a moment. And we're going to give it a color. And the color is going to be a pink color. And we'll give it a name. We'll call it V-Orc. All right, so same as the other virtual instrument, we don't worry about the monitor button. Not really much point with that. We've got record enable. I just need to change some settings for my particular MIDI controller, the Rolly Seaboard. Whether you need to do this is totally up to your device. And then we need to pick our sound. And I'm going to come in here and we're going to pick strings. And then we've got a few selections here. And I'm actually going to go for string section, which I know pretty much sounds good. But what we're going to do is make sure that we have some sound. So we'll check that out now. All right, so that's sounding good. All right, so again, I've worked out my parts ahead of the game. Took me a little while, this one, because I wanted to do something slightly different to what I've normally been doing. And I'm going to actually go through and do the bridge part first, because this part here was probably the bit that took me the longest to work out. So I want to get it recorded down while I still remember it. So we're going to make sure we've got record enable going, and we'll go and get started recording. All right, so I'm just going to have a listen back, but it sounded pretty good when I played it. So let's have a listen. Let's just trim off these starts first and the end. Okay, I am happy with that. Might do a little bit of tweaking later with some of the note lengths and make sure some of them on the beat, but we'll do that at the end. We'll get our bits recorded first and then we'll worry about editing them. But the performance to me is good enough that we just need a couple of maybe slight tweaks, but I'd be still happy to leave it as is even. All right, so let's record our verse part now and we'll get that locked in and then we'll get onto the chorus after that. Okay, let's have a listen back to that. Again, we'll trim it. Just not sure about the end. I think the rest was pretty good. Yeah, I'm not sure if the end should have finished with that boom, boom again. But we'll do the chorus first and we'll come back and tweak that part just to see. Well, we'll see if it actually needs it. Depends how it comes in on the chorus. All right, let's get on to recording the chorus now. And then we'll come back and edit and see where we're at. See if there's any other parts we need to record. All right, let's see what we got there. Okay, we obviously don't need this bit here. Okay, we'll do something with that in a minute. All right, so now we'll go ahead and start doing some editing. We'll tweak these parts a bit and get them a little bit more perfect.